Welcome to the second session of Bootcamp. Before we get started, there's a few announcements. First one, there's Hack for Impact stickers up here. If anybody wants a sticker, feel free to come grab one. Also, this Saturday, we're having a pumpkin patch social. That's going to be at the Avila barn, I believe. I believe there's also a post in the general Slack about that, so you can get all the details there, but love to see you guys, love to have you guys all come out for that. Membership due, just a reminder, if you haven't completed like I think the $15 membership due and you can't afford it, that would be great. If not, perfectly understandable. And yeah, last update is Vance will be here in about 20 minutes. He's in class right now, but he'll show up in a bit.
Where do you pay electricity?
I actually don't know.
That might be a question.
Yeah, there's a link in Slack that points to Notion that has a page to ASI thing with a PayPal link. I can see the directions for you.
That'd be great. Okay, yeah, so we're gonna go over today's agenda. Wait, for starting, we're gonna have a Kahoot review. So this is gonna be of last week's stuff. And so while we're getting that Kahoot set up, if you guys could all pair with one other person, get to know them, meet them, and then you guys will work on a Kahoot together. Do you have the link to the Kahoot?
It's in Slack.
It's in this right here. But you might have to be me to start it, but try it first.
No.
Hopefully you can host it. Now we can switch it on. I hate this. Classic. Hope you're ready to host Kahoot.
I don't know how to host it. It's just
Ryan. Multiple Ryans.
You guys do
that guy didn't care with
That could be Anna.
You gotta kick him out.
So we need permission.
What?
We need permission. Make them change their name. That's okay. I think you're rooting for. I'm rooting for Ethan and last. So yeah, if you have never used Kahoot before, you just go to the www.kahoot.it. It should ask you for a game pin. You enter that, and we'll get started here in a few minutes.
I think Paris is a good idea.
Yeah, Team Pepper did.
That's a good idea.
Are we waiting?
How many people do we have? Okay, 26 people. Probably not.
We get asked, I guess. Is everybody ready? Everybody in? We're waiting? All right.
Everyone's good? Did like a bullhorn.
So we should be good to get started. It's just going to be a lot of what we did last week. It'll be review. Should be easy. Maybe there'll be prizes for the winners. Maybe there won't. There isn't, but there is the huge ego boost for whoever wins. So, yeah.
All
Is
right.
everybody in?
Anyone waiting for?
Okay.
All right, let's get started.
Starting off with the question, what does HTML stand for? Wow.
Nice.
Good stuff, everybody.
Perfect teachers. In first place, we've got Ethan. Oh yeah. I don't even know this one.
Wow.
Perfect
Let's
again.
go, everybody.
Okay, we've got Ryan and Ryan.
Oh, that's might be kind of hard to see. Do you know if they get to see the options on the screen?
No, they don't.
Oh,
Almost. Still got the top.
I got some new risers. Nice.
Someone's got to be Ethan. One more.
Okay, nice.
Almost everyone.
Yeah, so OL is an ordered list and UL is an unordered list. Come on, somebody's got to beat Ethan.
You guys have got to be Ethan. Perfect.
Nice.
Still in first. Yep. No one's gonna challenge.
Oh, he's not even paying attention.
You're just too elite. So it goes this way. I don't know.
I wish we had the cool music. Maybe just beatbox.
It's just not this. Oh, wait, no, it's bigger, it's okay. Oh, you got the rhyme music.
Oh wait. Okay, yeah. That's
Who do you think they're? I don't know. 14. Oh, Ethan's back on top. It's close. Good score. The Ryan's got to come through.
These are kind of tricky questions.
They are.
So like,
They made a lot of tricky.
if you like look at one for a second.
Oh, there we go. It's
2
close.
questions left. Who's gonna take it? Font size is gonna be coffee. I think this selector is the one that's like before the P, so it's like a class. It's on the dot. Nice. Final question. Who's gonna take it?
Still a close race at the top. got it in the bag.
I think Ethan fixed it.
And he got it instantly.
Ooh,
A lot of answers there.
and the results. That's
Very
admirable.
close there.
Oh,
First place.
let's go.
Great. Good work, Ethan. Thanks.
Good stuff, everybody. Okay, so now we're going to be moving into the actual topic of today, and that's going to be Git. But before that, we're actually going to do a little bit more with CSS, and I believe Ben is going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the box model.
All right, so yeah, today we'll be talking a bit about the box model. So last time, what we talked about with CSS was kind of some basic styling stuff. So we did a lot with kind of text coloring, adding image styling, things like that. But today we're going to talk about the box model, which kind of gives more options with layout on your page and lets you kind of add more design elements to certain elements of your page. So what exactly is the box model? So every block level HTML element has 4 layers to its box model. And so remember, an element in HTML is just going to be one of those tags with content in it, something like a paragraph tag, just displaying text on screen. So the first part of the box model for an element is going to be the content area, and that's just going to be where your text is being displayed, or the image that you're trying to display, the actual content that you want on screen. And that's going to be this blue box in the center here, in the top right. I hope everyone can see that. But if we move outwards from that, we'll have padding, which is going to wrap around the content that you're trying to display. And usually what you can do with this is apply a background color to your content and use padding to adjust how far out that background color is going to go from that content. So if you want to put a black background behind some text that you wrote, you can increase the padding and make a box of content or background color that goes around that content. So after the padding, you'll add a border around the padding, which separates the padding and our last aspect, which is the margin. The border is pretty self-explanatory. You can add different thickness to it, add different colors, change the style of the border. And I personally think border is a really good way to kind of learn CSS and how you're working with layouts. So I would suggest while people are developing, add borders to pretty much all the CSS content that you're making. That way you can see where different elements are being laid out on your page and how different aspects of the box model are interacting with each other. So it's a good learning tool to use, even if you're not using it as your final style. And then last we'll have the margin, which is that outermost layer, this yellow area on the outside of the box. And that's just going to be kind of space in between different elements. So if you have a bunch of text that's kind of bunched up together, kind of like crashing into each other, you'd want to increase your margins to kind of add space in between that text and or images or whatever, and kind of give it a bit of a cleaner layout that's not all bunched up together. So a little bit about the div tag when it comes to the box model. So Vance and Cole kind of talked about this a bit last week. The div tag is super important for kind of grouping different elements together. So let's say, you have a bunch of text elements that are on different lines. You could surround them in a div tag and apply styles to all of those elements using that div tag. And div is a block level element that when combined with different design layouts, for example, FLEXBOX, which I'll talk about during the demo, you can create kind of new formatting that you can't do just with simple CSS. So the div element's a little bit abstract. I'll kind of go into what that looks like during the demo, but it's an important tool to kind of use when you're styling this kind of stuff. So before I do jump into the demo, does anyone have questions about that kind of stuff? Anything with the box model? All right, cool. So I'll hop over here. Okay, thanks. So I'll go ahead and open up some code that I already have written. So what I've got here so far is just a couple text boxes on a page and an image that I won't really be styling, but just so we can kind of see
Can you zoom in a
the
little
box
bit?
model on the screen. Yeah. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So first I'll kind of walk through what we already have written, just kind of so everyone's on the same page. So first we'll go into our HTML file here. We've got it set up just like last time. We've got, let me zoom in. Is that better? So we've got the head of our file here, which includes stuff like linking to the CSS style sheet. We've got just the title of our page that's displaying on the tab. And then we have the body of our HTML file again, which is just that content that we're displaying on the screen. So we've got a div tag here with a style class on it called boxes. We've got 3 individual paragraph tags with different ID style components attached to them. And then just that image that I was showing at the bottom of the screen. Won't be touching that too much, but just kind of so we have it as reference. Over in our CSS file then, we've got our boxes class, which is on that div tag surrounding everything. And we've got 2 elements, the background color and the border, which is set to a 3-pixel solid red line. So if we go back over to our website here, we can see the div tag that's surrounding our 3 paragraph elements here is highlighting the background of all 3 elements with light blue, and it's giving that red border to everything inside of the div or around the div components. So this way you can kind of visualize what the div kind of includes inside of it and what stylings will apply to what items on the page. We go back over here and we've got our individual class styles, and all I've added is a border to each individual box so that we can see each paragraph tag. The border is outlining the content and padding sections of that box model right now. So the first thing I'll kind of talk about is, again, Vance and Cole kind of talked about this last week, but a helpful tool for developing is to use inspect element. So if we right click on our page here and hit inspect, it'll bring up this helpful dialog for us. And just as a reminder, up in the top right here, we've got our HTML file that we just saw. If I go ahead and click on any of our elements, so say I click on the bottom paragraph box here, it'll highlight it for us. We can scroll down on the right side here and see that box model that we saw on the slideshow here. So what's helpful with this is it gives a perfect visual representation of what parts of the box model we're currently displaying on screen, and we can edit them and see live changes to it. So like I had in the CSS file, we've got that 3-pixel border on the border part of the box model right now. So if I wanted to see what different changes look like, I could say go to the left side of the margin here, double click on it and type 50 pixels, hit enter, and we'll see the change up top here. We've added a 50-pixel margin to that bottom box. And what's especially helpful with this is if we scroll up again, inspect element kind of gives us the CSS that we would use to create this. So in element.style here, it shows us the CSS we would write to add that margin to the box model that we just created. So this isn't necessarily how you'd want to develop full time and like figure out what you want to do, but it's kind of a helpful tool for learning if you just kind of want to play around with different styles, see what things look like, you know, live.
It's also super helpful for debugging.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes like you have a style, you think it should be working, and once you actually go in and look at it, it's easier to tell kind of where the error can be.
So, you know, and none of these changes stay. So it's helpful for just kind of trying out different styles without breaking your code. But so that now that we kind of have that tool that we know about, go ahead and reset the page back to where it was, and I'll show a couple of examples of different things we can edit. So if we come back into our file here, I'm going to edit this top content box here and just add a couple aspects of the box model to it. So the first thing we can do, like we just saw on inspect element, we can go margin, colon, and then 50 pixels. say if we wanted to add a 50 pixel margin to the entire slide. Go ahead and reload our page. And now what it's done is it's added 50 pixels of margin to the outermost part of our box model around this entire box. Now this isn't very aesthetically pleasing, looks kind of gross. So let's say we only wanted the margin on the top side to separate it from the top of that div box. It's pretty easy to go ahead and do that. All you gotta do is add which side you want to modify. So if I do margin top, go ahead and save it. Now you can see we've only got that 50 pixel margin on the top. And it works the same for the left, right, and the bottom as well. So if you want to modify just one part of the margin, you can go ahead and select which part you'd like. So if we move to the inside of the box model, we just edited the margin. So now if we go into the border here on this top box, I've already got this blue border set up. There's a lot you can do with borders though. You can change the thickness. So if we want a bit of a chunkier border, do a 10 pixel border. There's a lot of different styles you can do. Right now we have it solid, but you can do dashed if we're thinking of just something a bit fancier. And then any color you want, just the same as Vance talked about last week. There's a lot of different ways you can change the colors, but borders have all the same properties that background color, things like that too. So a lot of different styles you can do. This isn't necessarily good looking, but it's good to just have different borders so that you can pretty easily see what content you're editing. So now if we move further into the box model, down into the padding. So just like editing a margin, it works exactly the same way. So we can add padding. Say we want 10 pixels of padding around the entire box. Just padding 10 pixels. Reload our page, and we can see now we have that separation between the text and our border, so it's no longer as cramped up along the border. And to see that a little bit better, I'll add a background color. Just do a white background. And now you can see again, so that background color is going to extend all the way to the edges of the padding, but it's not going to go up into this 50 pixel margin that we made earlier. That way you can kind of separate different styles while adding spacing to it at the same time. So a lot of kind of what we talked about has been in units of pixels. It's a pretty common way to set units for how much space you want between stuff. If you want a little bit more dynamic spacing, you can use percentages as well. So if I change this to a 50% margin top, I'll actually change it to the left-hand side, so it's a bit easier to see. So this will add a margin on the left side that spans 50% of our page. And this margin will change with the size of the page. So if I make the page smaller or larger, that margin's just going to stay in the middle of the page. Now, this is a little bit hard to use because as you can see, we've done a 50% margin, but our actual content's kind of skewed to the right-hand side of the page. It's not like centered on the page or anything. So sometimes this is helpful, but a lot of times this isn't the style you want for layouts. So I'll just go ahead and set that back to 10 pixels. So do I have any questions right now kind of about like the box model and how that works when you're editing different aspects of the box model? Okay, cool. So I'll talk a little bit more about working with the div component. So kind of as I mentioned earlier, whatever you apply to the div component is going to apply to everything. So we change the background to something in the div, and it's going to change on the entire thing. But what becomes especially useful when using div components is when we want to change the layout of what we're seeing on the screen. So this is a little bit of a separate topic from the box model. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what's called FLEXBOX, and it's just kind of a different way to lay out content on your page. We don't have time to kind of get into all the details of FLEXBOX. It's a pretty robust topic, but we'll have some more resources that you can look through on your own if you want some more kind of advanced styling on your web pages that you're working on at home. But just as kind of a little intro of to what you can do with FLEXBOX. So we can change our display mode to flex. And then if we use what's called flex direction, we can kind of change like the orientation in which our content inside the div is laid out. So if I use flex direction row, and remember I'm applying this to the div class, so it'll be applied to everything that's inside of this div here. So I reload our page. So now instead of being laid out in that column format, our content's kind of laid out horizontally in a row. So, and then if I change this to column, we'll kind of see the same effect that we were just getting earlier with our content laid out vertically. There's some other aspects you can use with FLEXBOX. If you use align items, let's say I wanted to center our items on the page, you can use a property of FLEXBOX called align items. Use the center property, and now on the horizontal axis, that'll bring all of our content to the center vertical axis on the page, just giving it kind of a cleaner look than we had before with all these borders and boxes kind of strewn out all across the screen. So there's a lot more you can do with FLEXBOX. And again, I'll talk about the resources we have for that later, but this is just kind of an intro to like more advanced layout stuff that you can do. Do you have any questions about FLEXBOX before I move on? Cool. So I think that's actually it for the demo. Kind of talk about a little bit of review now. So just a little bit kind of about like the properties that we use in CSS. Okay, so I guess I actually didn't go over this, but if you use width and height properties, similar to margins, you can just add the amount of pixels that you want to change to modify the size of your content. And then the border tag we looked at, you can add color borders, different styles of borders, and then there's some more advanced stuff. You can add like curved edges, things like that. That's all stuff you can kind of look up for more syntax. The paddings and margins, you're going to want to use those to kind of add spacing between content, remove kind of that cramped feeling that you have on your pages before, and then to kind of play with those backgrounds a bit, you can use paddings and margins. And then if you want kind of more dynamic relative positioning, go ahead and use percentages. They're a bit frustrating to work with, so it takes some getting used to. Or if you want just kind of static position, use pixels for some constant positioning. And then so let's talk about FLEXBOX resources. These slides will be posted later, but we've got kind of a guide that explains FLEXBOX, and then a nice resource that I think Ethan found last year called FLEXBOX Froggy. You can kind of just go through different coding practices, and it's just like a couple lines of CSS to position some frogs on the screen. So you can just put them, dead center, top right, wherever you really need them to be. And there's other ways to position content, but FLEXBOX is just a really common way that you'll be using in your project teams. It's definitely takes some getting used to, but it's a fun topic to kind of study up on if you're more interested in that kind of stuff.
Sweet. Thanks, Ben. Now we're going to be kind of shifting gears quite a bit, and we're going to be going over Git and GitHub. Those are two different things, but we'll go into kind of what they mean, how they're used, and just kind of like how you can use them and how we will use them specifically as well. So just give me a second. I'll get this set up. Share my screen. Sweet. Hide this. And we should be good to go. Oh, not that. So what are Git and GitHub? So Git and GitHub allow us to collaborate easily with other people. So whenever you're working with software teams, there's a lot of like ways you'll use kind of like share your code, and GitHub is going to be kind of where that code is located, and Git is going to be how you actually interact with that. So Git is, a tool for tracking and managing changes to code and software development teams. And then GitHub is the cloud in which code is stored. Just if we could get a hands up of like how many people are familiar with Git and GitHub. Sweet. So a little more than half. So for those who aren't aware, there's a pretty common analogy that's used to better understand what these two mean. So porn and Pornhub, think of it the same way as that, except for Git is kind of like the content and GitHub is kind of where you can find it. So essentially this is kind of like just how we can write code in the same project, just on separate devices. So GitHub, you can kind of think of it like Google Drive or just some way where a lot of content is shared together. And then how do I use GitHub and Git? So Git is a program that can be downloaded. I think it's linked in the actual Notion pages, but it's pretty odd. You just search up Git and you'll find that. And then GitHub is a website and you'll actually need to create an account to use it. Accounts are free, and if you use the student developer pack, which I'd highly recommend, you get a lot of cool perks. So like there's a lot of things like you might get credits to AWS, or you might get to use all these other tools for free because you're a student. So I definitely recommend taking a look at the GitHub student developer pack. So GitHub repositories, and again, we'll get into what all these actually look like and how we're going to use them for our projects. And we'll show that during the demo. But for now, repos or repositories, that's just where your code is going to be stored. So when you're working with GitHub, you'll have two different repositories. You'll have your local repo, which is the code that's on your machine and kind of like your instance or version of the team's code. And then you'll have the remote repo. And that's the team's, like the current, I guess it's the source of truth for your team's code. And so a big problem that occurs is how do I sync up my remote code or my remote repo with my local repo? And that's where Git comes into play, because with Git, you can kind of like run different tools and different commands. And that's how you will kind of sync these two resources up. Sweet. And we're gonna actually do a demo which goes through a lot of this, and it'll actually be kind of, if you're unfamiliar with GitHub and Git, you'll do this very similar thing once you're sharing your actual milestones and your projects with us. So we'll go into that in a bit, but so I guess I'll actually go ahead and share what a GitHub repo looks like. So here we have like just the Bootcamp project's main repo, and there's a lot you can do with it. You'll mainly just see all of the code that's here. This one's not that exciting because nobody's actually pushing any code to it, but there is a README, and we'll actually go ahead and clone this in a bit. But just this is kind of what GitHub is. So this is the website we're on. You can see your account and your profile. And yeah, there's just kind of a lot of tools here. So yeah, syncing up your remote repo with your local repo is a big challenge. But luckily there are some tools some Git commands we can use to sync these up. So from a terminal or a command prompt or whatever you use depending on your machine, if you have Git installed, then you can go ahead and start running some commands. So if you want to pull the remote repo's changes and get those on your local machine, you can run git pull. And if you want to do the opposite of that and put your changes up to where the teams are, you can go ahead and do a git push. And then there's saving changes in Git. So after completing and testing a feature, it's a good idea to save your work. And you can kind of do that with a commit. So one of the biggest benefits of Git and GitHub is their use of version controls. So that way, if your code breaks, you can kind of go back to previous instances in time and look at your code, see kind of what went wrong. And if you need to, you can always go back to that instance. So this is a way to kind of like just make sure you don't lose everything. Yeah. So to actually go ahead and make a commit, you can run the command git add and then a file name. And so like if we made a change to index.html, we can do git add index.html, and then it'll be staged. And if you look at the graphic on the right, staged does not mean in the repository. But if you want to add multiple files, you can do git add dot, and that will stage all currently modified files. So only the ones that have been changed. And then once something is staged, you can go ahead and run a commit message, and that'll look like git commit -m and then the message you want to type. So these messages, they're actually pretty important because they tell the team that you're working with what changes are being implemented. And so if we made I guess we did something with the FLEXBOX, we made it a row, we'd want to say something like that. So that way our team would kind of know what we changed. And then once everything is staged, you can go ahead and git push, and then it'll actually be sent to the team's repository. Sometimes there are teams will have set up like different rules. So you can't go ahead and push whenever you want. But that's just kind of like the base flow in general.
All right, so now we're going to talk a bit about how to use Git in Teams. So how many of you have committed code before using Git? How many have pushed code? How many have made a branch before? That's why we're here. So in school, on like individual assignments, the kind of workflow is you clone all your code onto your local machine, you make changes, and then you just commit all and push all of it up in one big push. However, in software engineering, you have to work with other people, and other people also like to make changes to code. And when everyone does that, there's like lots of bad stuff that happens to the remote repository because everyone's trying to like change things at the same time. So lots of code gets out of date fast, bad code gets into the remote repository, and good code can get overwritten by bad code. So that's where branches come in. Branches allow multiple programmers to work on different features simultaneously and kind of controls the flow of new code into the remote repository. So what we're going to ask you to do at Hack for Impact is every time that you start working on a new feature, you create a new branch. And a branch is essentially just kind of isolating your code. So when you make changes to your local repository and push them up, they're not immediately in like the big master repository that everyone has access, that everyone's using. Yeah, so as I was saying, when you're working with branches, the first thing you want to do is you want to pull code because there might have been changes that other people have made to the code that you don't have on your local repository. So you want to sync that up first, and then you want to create a new branch. Make just the command for that called git checkout -b, and you have the branch name. And then you can work kind of how you have before. You can just make commits and push as you feel necessary. And then after all that's done, you can go onto github.com and make a pull request. And what a pull request allows you to do is it's kind of like the last final check before your code enters the master branch. So in GitHub, there's like a master branch, and then there's all these other branches that have like features. And a pull request is like, it's like, think of it like the TSA, if like the TSA was actually effective at their job. What they're doing, what's going to happen is you'll make a pull request on GitHub, people on your team will see it, and they can review your code, and then they'll say, oh, I approve this, or they'll say like, oh, here's a couple points where we can make changes, and then we'll merge this into like the master branch. So don't worry at all if like your first pull request isn't approved. I know mine wasn't. It's like pull requests are a great way to like make sure all of the code that ends up in GitHub is really good code. And then this is a bit more complicated, so I'm just going to give a very cursory overview, but occasionally, like if multiple people try to merge like changes to like the same file, GitHub like doesn't know what to do. So you'll have this thing called a merge conflict. Don't panic if you see it. It looks a bit weird at first and a bit janky, but if you just like Google git resolve merge conflict, what you want to do is you're going to want to sync you want to pull the change into your local repository and then merge the main branch into the branch you're working on. And then from there, you kind of like look at the code and you'll be able to see like line by line what like the current version is versus your version. And then you kind of manually merge that code together. It's a bit weird, but you'll get used to it after a while. But hopefully it doesn't happen very frequently. And now time to actually learn how to use Git and GitHub in a demo.
So yeah, we're going to be moving on to a demo. Feel free to follow along if you have Git installed. And actually, before we get started, we're going to talk a little bit about actually like using a terminal. Not everybody's familiar with using a terminal, PowerShell, command prompt, whatever you guys are comfortable using. That's probably the best option. I believe Bash is another one. And so to get started, we'll actually go ahead and open up a terminal, and we'll just kind of do some pretty common commands that you might do. So a terminal is kind of, I say terminal, but I think it's actually Linux or Unix that I'm using.
On Mac.
On Mac, it might be Bash.
Yeah.
It's
different.
But it's all very similar between systems. And so we'll just kind of go over some common commands. And if everybody can see that, that's sweet. So probably the most common command is ls, and that prints kind of where you are just in your like files directory. If you want to change or see what your current working directory is, you can do pwd or print working directory, and that'll just say like the route, like where you're actually located. Some other ones we can do are we can cd into a different thing. So like if you want to go to our desktop and see all the commands there, we can run cd desktop. And then, yeah, we can see all the new files we have there. So I'll actually go into hack print packs, and also with cd, you can go back a file. So you can do that with just ... It'll take you back to where you were. And then there's some other things you can do as well, such as open new files, create new files, make new directories. Those aren't very important when working with Git, but those are options. And there really is a lot you can do when working with the terminal. So now we're actually going to switch gears a little bit. I'll be using this for Git, although there are also user interfaces you can use for Git as well. I know VS Code, I'll briefly go over there for a second. They have this source control thing, and you can initialize Git in here. There's also other features or other interfaces you can do. I know GitHub, like desktop, is a common one, but we'll just be using the command line for this. And especially when you're learning and trying to figure out how to learn Git, I'd strongly suggest trying to do everything from the terminal, because that's kind of where you're gonna like be forced to like actually know what you're doing. But yeah, so we're actually gonna go to this repository and actually create a fork. So whenever we're creating a fork, and I guess for the project you'll be working on, you're gonna go to this exact repository. It's linked in the Notion, and you wanna go to the top right and click on this fork, and then you'll choose an account to fork it to. I'll put it in this main one. And then now we have kind of like a copy of everything that was in the repository that we like forked from. So it's just kind of like a different branch. If I were to make changes on this branch and push, it would only go to this branch. It wouldn't go to the repository I forked from. And now we're actually going to go ahead and clone this repository. And the way you'll do that is you're going to want to click on this code button. There's a few different options you can use. You can use SSH, but I always use the HTTP option. You can just copy that. And then whenever you want to place it somewhere, I'll actually put it in the demos. We can do git, run the command git clone, and then paste. And now we're going to have a new, we're going to have our own instance of Git initiated on this thing. And then we can kind of like start to do our work on here. But as Vance said, it's always good to use a branch. And why you want to do that is because if multiple people are working on the same project and you don't create a branch, so let's just say you're on the main repository that everybody else is on, then it's just kind of like you're not going to get the benefits of version control and working kind of in teams. You're going to like conflict with each other, and that's bad. So whenever you want to do that, you're always going to want to create a new branch, and we can do that with git checkout -d and then a branch name. I'll call it demo. Oh yeah, sorry. You actually have to go into the project you created. So for me, it's the Bootcamp Project 1, 2021, and now we can actually create a branch. So we can do git checkout -d demo, and now if we run the command git status, it will tell us what branch we're on and if there's any changes. Right now, there aren't any changes, so we can just go ahead and do that right now. We can just, this is going to be a Linux command, not a Git command, but we can create a file. I guess I'll actually do something interesting like index.html. Thought that should work. Maybe that's the do a different one. So we'll actually make a directory. It's actually touch, not cat. I think cat is how you view the contents of a currently existing file. Touch is how you create a new one. So now I'm going to make a slight change into this. And so we'll, I don't know, we'll say this is my demo changes. And go ahead and save that. Escape and hide these meeting controls. And yeah, now we can run git status again and see if anything changed. Notice there's going to be this new file that appears, index.html. That's the file that we actually just added to. We created that file and then we added content to it. And yeah, so now we can create another file if we want. We could do like maybe our CSS file. We can say like, I don't know, I'm not going to add an actual CSS, but like added a style. Then we can go ahead and save that. Hide this again. And now we can do git stats again and see these changes. So now there's two files we added. You can do this with or without from the command line. You can just create a file how you would otherwise, and it should still exist as long as you're in the cloned repository. So for us, that's that Bootcamp project 2021. And then let's say this is kind of like at this point, this is where you're going to be doing most of your coding. You'll kind of like create your changes while you're at this point. We're still on the demo branch, which is good. But then it'll say we're ready to commit. We've made all the changes we wanted to change. We could do either git add a file name, so that could be index.css or index.html, or we could just do the git add all. And then it should be in that staged thing we were talking about earlier. So it's staged but not committed. It's not anywhere, but it's still completely only on your local branch. So we can actually commit this with like a commit message. Let's say first, I guess they should be descriptive commit messages. So for us, we created 2 new files. Nothing too interesting here, but once you're actually like making a change to something important, it's good to put that with a good commit message. And then we can actually go ahead and push our code after we run that commit. And we can do that with git push. That should be good. Oh, sorry. You have to push your branch. So that's going to be git push -u origin, then the name of your branch. We called it demo, I believe. And then it'll actually push to the upstream branch. And that's going to be the one that's not the demo branch. And we can actually go back to GitHub and see this was changed. It says demo had recent pushes less than a minute ago. And we're still on our forked branch. So we can actually go ahead and show what a pull request would look like and go ahead and pull these changes in. If somebody was going to be reviewing your code, you could add reviewers up here. You can also leave comments, all that stuff. But yeah, we'll go ahead and just merge this in just to see what it looks like. And sweet, all checks have passed. We'll go ahead and merge this in. Let me make sure I'm not in the wrong place. I am. Yeah. So this is what I just did. I shouldn't have done. I got carried away because I have admin privileges. But what I was going to be doing is what you guys are going to be doing when you're working on your projects. So I guess remember when I was at the pull request thing, we created this 2 new files here. That's kind of where you guys are going to leave the code where you work on these projects. And we don't want all of this to be merged, because then we're going to have that would be like what 150 recipes, and it's just going to look bad. We're all going to be doing the same things. So for the sake of our project, we're just going to create a pull request and not merge it in. That allows people like us to review it pretty easily. That way you can get some feedback on your code. That was a little bit weird because I got mixed up. I thought I was on my forked repository, but I was on the actual repository. Sorry about that. It should look pretty similar, but whenever you are making that pull request, there will be an option to compare across forks. And that will be important. I don't know if I'll be able to show it, but maybe if I do new pull request. Yeah, if you do a new pull request, you can compare to any actual changes. So any branches or forks that have been changed, you can compare across forks. And then this is what I should have done, is found mine and then try to merge that into this main repository. With that being said, I think that's all for the Git demo. Did I miss anything? Sweet. So we'll go back to the slides, and we are almost finished, but we will do a bit of a review first.
Any questions before we review?
So yeah, this is just kind of a resource you can use, which has a bunch of the more useful Git commands, things like git checkout. That's how you change branch. I don't think it's called master branch. I think it's changed to main. So this might be a bit outdated, but git checkout main is going to be the main branch, or you can do git checkout whatever branch you created. So for us, that was demo. And then git pull, you're going to want to do that to update your local changes to match the remote ones. So when your teammates make changes, you're going to want to pull in their code, and you'll do that with git pull. And so yeah, you're going to want to do that before you create the task or do any work. And then after you do your task, you're going to want to add those files, and that's going to look like git add and then commit to stage. And then you want to push all those changes as well. And then working with branches, this is just a more, I guess, detailed how you create branches and stuff like that. So that's just going to be a resource that you all can look at. And yeah, so like I said, there's also those user interfaces. If you use Git and VS Code, it'll look something like this, and you can actually like run pull requests and like push and do all of that from user interface. That's what I usually do. That's kind of why this demo got a little bit scuffed, because I was trying to do something I wasn't comfortable with. And that's why I would recommend actually using terminal to actually do a lot of these Git requests first, because that's how you really learn. And yeah, so back to milestone 1. We're all going to be sticking around here for about until 8. And that's going to be a way for anybody who's working on it, who needs help, to get help. But yeah, I think that just about covers it for this week. Next week, we're going to be going into JavaScript. And that's more of an interesting topic, in my opinion. Get something probably all of you will work with in actual teams. So it is useful, but it's just not the most interesting. It's just something you kind of need to know. But yeah, I think that covers it for this week. Is there any questions? Sweet. So yeah, we're going to be sticking around to help out anybody who has questions about their project, but y'all are free to go. Super nice seeing you. Remember, those are the reminders. And we'll send out any other information we missed. Or